renewing our infrastructure and renewing the energy efficiency. I'm a huge advocate for it. I'm just concerned that we're taking a huge lump sum of money right now as a loan. And I know interest rates are very low, but my philosophy, and especially that we have learned from the experience about the school bond with the P to 12, is that we need this money. We need to borrow as little money as possible, because obviously there's interest baked into this project as well, and I don't know what the interest rate will be when we get this bond issued. So I was just looking, I'm not saying we're gonna dip more from the reserves, because we're already dipping, I believe, 6.8, President Kavanaugh.
Oh, more than that, more than we
Yeah.
Use of revenues, it says here on the memo. It says,
7 something, yeah.
okay, because I see it as use of reserves on page 3. It says 6.8 million, so I don't know if that has changed. And then reserves there as funding, it says 7 million. So I don't know how these numbers are a little bit different. Is that note 1 and note 2?
I don't know what you're looking at, Trustee Moser.
I'm looking at page 3 of the memo.
If you look at the note you're referring to was 6.8. That would be if we funded this entire project with reserves. Our reserves would drop from 22 million to 6.8 million.
Right.
That's what that note is. What we are looking at under the funding category, when it says reserves, IEMP, that's $7 million. And that's in the plant fund.
Yeah.
So $7 million and then 4.4 coming from the general fund, right?
No, the 4.4 is a reduction in cost in the general fund. As I explained earlier, not tonight but before, is that that's a reduction in our general fund budget, because baked into the $23 million project are going to be things like roof replacements, things that we would normally budget
Have to do anyhow.
We will not
Right.
have to generate in the general fund.
Okay. And then you have the millage renewal that was passed last year with another 4 million.
Yes.
So you're still at 15.4,
Yep.
and that's where it's needed.
And hence the bond. All right, are we ready to vote?
Did you want a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Barry,
Yes.
Lane, yes. McDonald,
Yes.
Mead,
Yes.
Moses,
No.
Thorpe is not here. Petchlicoff.
Yes. Motion
5-1.
passes. Next, please.
Sorry. Board of Trustee business, acknowledgement of correspondence.
I don't think I've received anything.
Board committee reports.
Okay, policy.
Yeah, the policy committee met to discuss residency classification of TPS students. The residency classification of temporary protective status students is assigned by the Department of Homeland Security, and it is for those individuals from specifically designated countries that are confronting situations that make it difficult or unsafe for those individuals. The Secretary of Homeland Security has the discretion of deciding which countries fall into that category of TPS. And as of May of 2019, there were 10 countries that were designated. They included El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. The committee considered the concerns of advanced by Trustee Lane and recommended that the college treat the residency of the TPS students who are currently designated as international students as out-of-district students. And that currently would be approximately 8 students. We also discussed the continuation of looking through our bylaws, and what we're going to do is we are going through all of the bylaws and the policy. We're revising them. We are updating all of them, and we're doing them in sections. We're doing a section at a time, and we're looking at each one. And then as we're going through one section, we determined that there's parts of one section that might actually fall into a section that we've already looked at. So the best way to move forward is to finish the whole thing in parts, because it's the best way for us to handle it. It's really large. So if we finish it in parts, we will bring it to the whole board as one completed document. And so that will roll over, I'm sure, until the next policy committee.
Next
So,
year.
Yeah, next year. So just to let you know, that's how we're handling it.
I'd like to correct you. I think that not just, I think that TPS students should be treated with their residency as their domicile. That they shouldn't be treated specially and put them automatically in an out-of-state category. If they live in the city of Dearborn, they should be Dearborn residents.
Right.
They're different from international students.
The committee considered your concerns, and we discussed it, and we appreciate you bringing those concerns forward. The direction of the committee was that they are getting a discount. They're not paying the international rates. They are getting a break in by paying the out-of-district rates.
Well, that's fine, but the committee can decide whatever it wants. I'm just saying that I think that you misunderstood. My position was that like the other community colleges, we have their policies,
we-
they considered residents domicile as residents.
But that wasn't for TPS students. That was for DACA students, other.
Most of them don't have a policy for TPS.
Well, we had two, right, exactly. We had two versions, and we considered one version was the out of, where everyone would be
Out of district.
classified as out of district, and the other version would be dependent on where their residency would be. So some would be out of district, some would be in district, and some could even be out of
And
state.
that's what I was
Right,
requesting.
and we understand that. And we took those into consideration, we had a discussion on it, but that was the recommendation that was being brought forward by the policy
Okay,
committee, the
trustee-
subcommittee.
Trustee Barry?
So I guess I got a couple of questions here. We're not going to see this at the next board meeting?
Yes, that's the plan, on having that.
Because you
Brought
said
forward.
we might be going into January. You want to
No,
bring it-
that was for
That's
the.
for
po-
the
Okay, thank you.
bylaws
I just wanted to make sure I was
policy.
clear on that.
Yeah.
And if a student lives in Dearborn, how can we, I mean, what does the jurisdiction say that we can actually put them in a non-district tuition?
As of now, the TPS students are given international rate. That's the category that they fall under.
Got it?
So by changing the policy, we are giving them a break to out of district, which is less than the international rate.
Student lives in Toledo, Ohio, wants to attend Henry Ford College for whatever reason, we give them
And their TPS?
their TPS, yes, and I'm only talking about
Okay.
TPS students here. We give them in-district. I mean,
No,
out-of-district, in-state tuition, right? But what if they actually live in a district? How can we, why would we say no to that? I don't know, you've done all the, you guys have done all the homework.
That was the recommendation of the subcommittee. We discussed it, and that was the recommendation of the subcommittee.
And I'm not the expert on TPS, from what I understand, that program's been shut down.
That is my understanding
So
too.
it's
But it
not-
would change in the future, depending on who is head
Well,
of.
not shut down. President
It's-
Trump, for certain
Right.
countries, has only renewed the
Right.
people who already have a TPS status.
It can be
So-
extended by 6 months, 8 months, or 12
And-
months.
And some
And-
countries have been having it for years. El
Right.
Salvador has been having it for 24 years. so,
Right.
And it's
So-
been renewed every year, so
Where-
or every
As
18 months.
currently, all of the countries that are listed as TPS countries, I believe they are all due to expire sometime in 2020. But that is subject to change depending on what happens in the next election. They may expire
Absolutely.
and then they may be brought back. That is up to the discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Where I was going with this, I didn't finish, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Where I was going with this, we have 8 students that we're talking about, pretty much. Okay? And let's say 2 or 3 of those students actually live in the Dearborn or within our district. I'm sure there's a reason why we call it in-district. Those are investors. I mean, no matter where they're living, if they own the property or renting or what have you, somehow, some way, they're paying, either through their rent or their property taxes, they're paying taxes, they're coming back to the college. Was that discussed at the committee
We did.
meeting?
We discussed it for a couple of months, and then we brought in trustee Lane, and she brought up her concerns last month, and
I guess the question that's really being asked is, why was it not considered just based upon their physical residency?
we had discussed that. The other member of the committee was trustee Thorpe, and he is not here at the moment. He was here for the committee meeting earlier. And the view was that they are getting a discount. And normally, they would be charged international rates.
But if we're going to look at changing this whole policy, then why are we not considering the changing it to the extent where we only consider where the student is actually residing, as opposed to, I get that, yes, we're
what were the
dropping it,
arguments
but-
against, I guess?
Yes.
The arguments against were that they are getting a discount already. That was the argument against. We talked about them being, and there was different thoughts on all of the sides of that. But the committee brought forth this recommendation. Now, this will be the recommendation presented. If it votes down, then the committee can.
That is my fear. If we bring this in December and it gets voted down and we're going to be starting a new semester, why are we going to be holding up?
Perhaps I can offer some
Please.
Please.
guidance.
Clarity, and then trustee Moses has a
Sure.
question.
I was not at the policy committee this evening, and I may invite General Counsel Clark to come up because she was, but I do understand that there is some discussion here going on about the committee's work, and I just want to maybe set the framework for what are the options, and then I can recommend to you all what might be a judicious way to proceed. There are two potential options that exist now for treating students who are acknowledged by the United States government as TPS. And the two options deal with the student who is living and can verify he or she is living in Dearborn. One option is this student who is a TPS identified person by the federal government living in Dearborn would pay the out-of-district rate, which is roughly $177 per credit. The other option that the committee has evaluated would be to treat that person who is identified as a TPS person in the United States living in Dearborn would be to charge them the in-district rate, which is $101.50. And the college administration essentially said that second option would be to treat TPS the same way we treat DACA students. And so, as you all know, we currently treat TPS students as international students. So the two options are option number one, move these TPS students to be seen as out-of-district students for the rate. And the second option is to give them the further benefit of giving them in-district tuition if they can prove their in-district residence. And the easiest way to accomplish that policy-wise is to treat them the same way we would treat DACA students. Now, what I frankly recommend to you all is that with that kind of crystallized idea of option number one and option number two, I think it would be useful for you all to engage in a healthy debate about the policy now and next month, and see what motion carries and what policy comes out of a motion. And I have forwarded to all of you the two options, and in fact, on top of them, it's highlighted as version 1 and version 2. I'm sorry that that we didn't make it as clear as I possibly could. But I hope that my colloquy now gives you some idea of the two sides, and of course, please feel free to disregard my advice on how to run the policy discussions here. But I hope that helps you understand the two sides.
Well, and first I want, Trustee Moses has
Okay,
been waiting
sure.
to ask his
Sure.
question.
Well, it's not more of a question, it's more of a comment on the discussion. Thank you, President Cavalluna, for your perspective. I think that cleared a lot of things for us. I just want to say, for knowing some students who have that status, that they are in very tough situations. They're in limbo. They're in this country because they can't go back to their mother country. So, and they're very vulnerable. People who are now fortunately have the option to work with that status in the U.S. And if they do live in the city of Dearborn and they pay rent or they own a property, I don't see a reason why we would not grant them the in-district tuition. That's just my perspective. I think that's what a good college and good university should do, is to obviously welcome these students with open arms, because they do also add to the value of the student body in a different perspective, especially that they might be in a situation where they don't know what they do, and a college degree would add a lot to their credentials. So I totally agree with Trustee Lane that we should definitely consider students based on where they live, whether they have the DACA status or the TPS status. And I would be in favor, if there is a motion, to grant them tuition based on where they reside, not just because of their status. So
Okay, thank you,
was just my
Trustee Moses.
perspective.
Well said. Dr. Mead?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I'm very sensitive to that. What my question is if you're a F1 student and you live in Dearborn, you still have to pay international rates. But people who are on F1 status, they can't own anything, right?
No,
They
you can
can't.
own property.
They can't own property?
Yes, they can.
Oh, they can. All right. So, okay, so that's the issue. We've got more international students. How will they accept that these students get a break when they don't?
They have a different visa.
That would be understood by people who are on F1. I mean, would they see this as being
Issuance of the
fair?
visa is, that's a condition that they tell them when they apply for a visa in China.
All right. Well, would they see it as fair? I'm just asking.
Yes.
No, it's a good question,
Trustee
Dr. Mead. I am very familiar with students that come from other countries. I know a couple that came from Lebanon, and when they know that they're coming here, they come to Henry Ford and eventually go to Wayne State or next door, they usually have a letter of support from a family member back home. Now, these countries, these 10 countries, there is no support from back home. They're here and, trying to do the right thing. So I know someone that came here many, many years ago on a student visa. And the aunt was supporting him, went back home, then went through the regular process and came back, and he's a U.S. citizen now, very, very productive because of the area he grew in. But that is the difference. That is a very
All right,
good
so
question. There's a difference. When they're here on an F1 visa, they usually have a letter of support. There's a family supporting them back home.
Okay, so they
providing
have
for them.
resources.
They have resources,
But
exactly.
the TPS have no
They-
resources. Okay.
Can I add one
Yeah.
more thing to what Trustee Barry said? Also, F1 student visas, and correct me if I'm wrong, President Cavalluna, that they do also have some sort of scholarships from their mother countries as well, that they send them here based on their academic performance, and they
F1.
then
Okay.
they send them also, and I don't think they cover all of tuition, but they do send them assistance. I know Yemen used to do, before the war, a lot of students would come here, and they don't start at a university because of the language issues, and they start at Henry Ford and they pay Henry Ford tuition international, but they still have that support of the mother country paying some of their tuition. So they do have some level of support, but unfortunately, TPS students they're on their own. They don't have any other support. So I don't think the F1 visa students would be as upset, because they
They're not in a
would
similar
feel for their
situation.
colleagues as well, yeah.
Trustee McDonald?
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
Trustee Moses, I'm not, I think some F1 students do exist without formal financial
Absolutely.
aid. But the relationship between an F1 student and the United States is one where the two have agreed that the person is coming here to study.
Strictly, yeah.
And the purpose of studying is the reason for their existence, their lawful existence in the country. The TPS student, the TPS person is in the United States because they've convinced the federal government that they cannot go back to the place where they came from because of the reasons that Trustee McDonald listed, which are civil unrest and lack of safety.
Yes.
Those are the definable differences between those persons' legal authority to be in the country. There are more, but that's the pivotal one. And I would say, in my understanding of the TPS person, they're not able to go back to where they came from. So they're getting the federal government's blessing in the United States to be here. And then it's them coming to the Henry Ford College or the blank college, which is different than the F1 student whose full purpose of being here in the United States, at least in the federal government's eyes, is for the purpose to come to the education.
Absolutely.
And while the TPS students or TPS persons' future is unclear because of the unrest that gave them the right to be here, it is at least somewhat thought that they may never go back. That they're on the path to being a full-time citizen here, and they're kind of expected to act like it. Which, if you're in support, and I know Trustee Moses, you have made the statement, I am not taking a position on this.
Absolutely.
But if you're in support like you are, one might say, well, this TPS student is on their path to being a citizen of the United States, or trying to be.
Right.
And that is unique from the F1 student visa.
Absolutely.
So Trustee McDonald?
I am not opposed to giving TPS students in-district rates if they can prove that they are a resident. I'm not opposed to that. We had even talked about, and my inclination was to bring both versions forward for a discussion. That was my inclination. But we were told, or the discussion also included, as part of the subcommittee work, we should make a recommendation. That's why it was done this way. But I am not opposed to having the discussion, and I am not opposed to them necessarily getting, so don't think that I am stuck on the view that they don't deserve it. Please don't think that.
Well, then, here's the, Trustee Lane.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, here's the conundrum we find ourselves in, because the committee made a recommendation, which
Okay.
was one way. Clearly, you're hearing a different kind of argument against that. And if we want to move this to a vote in December,
Which we would like to do.
then
That was part of the reason why
There-
we made a recommendation, so we could
Right.
move it to a vote in December.
the problem being, now that you've heard this, do you have time as a committee to either meet again to
Well, since-
reconsider a different, otherwise, there's the potential for this motion to fail, and/or we have two motions on the agenda, and one is going to pass and one is going to fail,
And that just
which
adds
is
to
not,
confusing,
I
right?
was
You
gonna
don't
say,
wanna
which is
do
not
that.
the way we would normally
What I
do
will
it.
do is I will speak with the members of I can speak to Dr. Mead anytime, but I will speak to
The
Trustee
committee,
Thorpe.
yes.
Yeah, and I'll speak to members of and see if they would like to, in light of the information that's been shared here tonight and the strong feelings of the rest of the board, if they would like to change the recommendation.
Or have an argument that makes sense, because quite frankly, what I'm hearing, I haven't really heard the argument against, other than they were getting a break by being moved out of international to out of district, but that still doesn't speak to why not take them all the way then to they're living in the community, they have residency in the community.
Part of
So-
the other discussion was just to keep things across the board the same. You
With
know-
what?
I mean, with those students, to have one classification for those students. That was part of the argument, just to keep it
Oh,
simple.
so
But I'm-
it doesn't
like I
matter
said,
where they live.
I'm not opposed to that, and I will talk to members of the committee, and I will share
I
with
think you may need, I think that would be in the better
I
interest.
will share
of
with you what the committee chooses to do, and we'll bring forward that.
Yeah, I would
next
like
month.
one document
Right.
sent to the board before the December meeting so that we can look and know what it is that is the recommendation that we will be voting on.
Okay.
And that would be how we would move forward. Yes, President Cavallini.
Madam Chair, it sounds like you're moving in a direction that you've just directed, and if that's what you feel most comfortable with, then please feel free to disregard what I'm about to say. But the committee, at the committee's direction, I circulated the two options.
Right.
Those two options are before the board, at least now for the board members to look at. You've had a healthy discussion about it now, and you've either taken a recommendation from the subcommittee or not. I think you're well advised as a board to go next month, and if any board member grabs a version that I've presented to you, if there's support for that to change the policy, you have had thorough debate and been shown that. So
But something has to be on the agenda. We have to have something to move on,
well,
policy-wise.
you could have an item on the agenda that is
How to handle TPS
how to handle
students.
TPS and see what motions carry.
Well, that's what I suggested. I said we can do it one of two ways. The recommendation of both, and one passes.
Well, it wouldn't be the recommendation
Okay.
of both, it would just be.
Presentation of both.
Well, no, not necessarily. I think what President Cavalluna is saying is just put out a generic, how should we handle TPS students?
Then somebody can
on
put a
the-
motion on the
Somebody can
table.
put a
And if
motion on the
somebody-
table, yeah. Well, that's basically the same, yes. Yeah, we have
It's not
to
as messy, though, you don't have
have
different
two different ones, yes.
items on the
Trustee
agenda.
Lane.
I would just like to add that beyond the designation that the Secretary of Homeland Security issues, recognizing those countries, the Department of Homeland Security further goes a step further and actually issues them a work authorization.
Right.
Which does not happen in all categories in the U.S. They specifically grant them work authorization in recognition that these people need to be able to work here because they have no other means of support.
And they are stuck.
And they're stuck. They're stuck between an earthquake or whatever it is that
Or
that
war
they're
or
here,
whatever
or a
the case.
war or whatever. So,
Good point.
All right.
Can I add one more thing for the committee to consider? Because as I'm aware that when a person applies for this, now, some countries have passed the law, you cannot apply for it anymore, but others can. There is a waiting period where they wait 7 months, but automatically they get that authorization that Trustee Lane was talking about. So do we consider, although they're not classified as TPS, it's pending TPS status. So I hope the committee can even look into that and says, okay, what do we do about these students who are pending TPS status prior them to getting TPS? Because when they're pending TPS, as I read the law, it was saying that they can actually take that letter that says you're pending TPS and you could go apply for a job. You
And-
don't have to wait for those 7, because it takes 7-8 months to get a response from the Homeland Security and telling them you're granted TPS or you're not granted TPS. So,
Well,
Is-
then we're moving a little further away from the
As-
verbiage.
right, so it has
would
to
be
be said
considered.
that you have TPS, because you may have some students who may hear about this, come apply, and they still don't have their TPS. They're in TPS pending, and then we may have to deny them or accept them. That's depends on the policy. Hopefully, it's not going to be as vague, so they would not be confused that you need that TPS status in order to be admitted, or we could accept your pending TPS application. So
Thank you.
that's something to consider.
Thank you.
All right, I don't think we're any clearer than we were.
Madam Chair, here's what I propose you do. I propose that the board takes an agenda item next month to resolve the TPS question. And if there's no motion, then we just keep it as.
Right.
If there's a motion, any board member can say,
Can-
I move version 1, I move version 2. And
I agree
I've
with
sat
you
with the
there.
policy committee. I respectfully suggest that the policy committee has done its work.
And now it's up to us to select one or the other. So all I will tell you then is come prepared in December with your understanding and with the, armed with the language that has been sent to us already, so that we have a clear reading when the motion is made, and that we're not fumbling around with what's going to be included in the language of the policy that will be voted on.
And the language that was delivered in both version 1 and version 2 should be verbatim, the
Yes,
language, because it
yes.
fits within the policy. It
Yes,
fits the
yes,
parameters
yes,
of the policy.
We can't keep adding and
Right, it needs
adjusting
to-
when it comes to that. So that's what I'm going to charge everybody with. Trustee Lane, did you have something else you wanted to add or no? Okay, are there any other committee reports?
There's a finance committee meeting. There was a finance committee meeting and President Petchkoff, you decided, or you offered to report on that?
I did.
You told me you were going to. Oh, okay. So it
you
was,
took the notes.
well, I
Yeah.
can, yeah. It was on the integrated energy management, and it got into lots of details. In attendance was Mr. Peter, who's back there, and Ms. Susan from Butzel Long. It's been reviewed by our subcontractees, Mr. Sutkowski, and our attorneys as well. So there are a couple of quick points to mention. It is saving us a lot of money. President Cavalluna summarized it this way. The risk reduces, all right, now how did you put this? The risk that is reduced is guaranteed by performance guarantees? Is that correct? Do I have that accurate? So we have a large contract. We're worried about how is that contract save us money over a long period of time because we're investing a lot of money. The way that we are at lower risk is that there are guarantees that if the contractors do not live up to the high standards that they've guaranteed us they will meet in energy reduction, water consumption reductions, et cetera, they will make up that money difference to us. Is everybody clear on that? There is, I think, $400,000 saved on deferred maintenance.
Is that total?
Per year.
Per year.
Okay.
And I was wondering what kind of maintenance are we talking about? And we're not talking about pushing a broom or custodial, we're talking about roofs and other building infrastructure. There are examples of projects that are slowly going forward. John Sutkowski knows of Owens Community College where it's successful. And the start for this will be 90 days out. And in that period, we don't have to outlay